All right, welcome back to Gilbert. It's all about the media podcast. I am your host, Gilbert Garcia. We have an interesting topic today, and first just want to say whatever's going on in Russia and the Ukraine, just to let you know, you guys have my heart and you have my prayers to any civilian out there, Russian, Ukrainian, or even other foreigner that happens to be living in the Ukraine. You know, we're all human, and let's not abandon this. All right. I don't know if anyone's ever seen the new Peacemaker. The first season just ended. It's actually really cool, you know. James Gunn directed the show. He did everything because if you've seen the Suicide Squad, the second movie, Peacemaker is in that movie. He's played by John Cena. I love seeing John Cena act like Peacemaker. If you haven't seen Peacemaker, I recommend you should. DC shows have been going good lately. Yeah, Peacemaker is good, but that's not really what the topic's about. It's just kind of an intro to this topic. So recently I started binge watching Smallville. And if anyone has never seen Smallville, you should. It was a great show. I guess if you want to know the details, it's when Clark Kent, the stories of Clark Kent before he became known as Superman. He's played brilliantly by Tom Welling. He did the show for 10 years. He recently came back as Clark Kent when the CW did their Crisis on Infinite Earths series. The scene where Tom Welling came back as Clark Kent was very underwhelming because he gave up his powers just to be a family guy. I mean, I get it, but in the end, I mean, come on, how can we not want to see Tom Welling as Clark Kent? If you've seen the show, even if you haven't seen the show, I'll just say that Clark Kent loses his powers a lot in the show. A lot. So to see that happen again, you know, seeing a powerless Clark Kent just feels wrong for me. It just feels wrong for me. But it's a good show. And I held back on watching it because I don't know if anyone has ever kept up with the news of one of the cast members in the past. But to many who do not know, Allison Mack, who played Chloe Sullivan in Smallville, she played one of Clark's best friends since elementary school, high school. The actress Allison Mack was involved in a sex cult, and a lot of it dealt with trafficking, and I'm pretty sure most of them were minors too. So I was held back on watching it just because it's like, do I want to watch a show where one of the leads happens to be someone who trafficked people, who sex trafficked people, you know? And it's funny because Allison Mack was introduced to this cult by a different cast member, Christian Kruick, who played Lana Lang in the show. However, Christian Kruick had admitted she didn't really know what this cult was. In fact, what she read about it wasn't read as a cult. It was read as more like a charity society or something like that. So she thought Allison Mack would be interested in it. I don't know, because they both knew something was shady, but Christian Kruick, she got out as soon as she could, but Allison Mack decided to stay. I don't want to blame all of this on Christian, but, you know, we could just say maybe she should have did her homework thoroughly. But it's a really good show. But I will admit, as I started rewatching this, I noticed that the visual effects are pretty outdated. Like, they're really, no, not even pretty outdated. They are extremely outdated. At least so far, like the first couple of seasons. I just started binge watching season 4. I'm pretty sure by the time season 5 comes around that this episode will be aired. But yeah, the special effects were very outdated, very cartoony. I've never noticed that till now. And maybe they're just starting to look a lot more outdated. Maybe like I was just so blindsided on like liking the show, I never really fully noticed it, you know? You know, it was 2001 and it's television, so you can't really like expect, you know, like Marvel level special effects, you know? But I held back on it because of Allison Mack, but in the end, I was like, you know what? I got really nothing to do, so let's just do it. Yeah, it's a good show. Michael Rosenbaum, who played Lex Luthor in Smallville, in my opinion, is the best Lex Luthor that has ever played Lex Luthor. Him and Clancy Brown, who voiced Lex Luthor in the animated show. Smallville Lex Luthor is my favorite, and the reason why is because when you watch anything that involves, you know, a villain, you want to know how they became what they are. Because nobody really wakes up and says, today I'm going to be evil. No, you see how Lex Luthor starts to become Superman's arch enemy. And in the show, Clark and Lex are best friends. And as the show progresses, you see that friendship die down. And you can say, as I rewatched this, I would say Lex has always been a villain, but it wasn't as severe as it is like later on in the series. And the reason why is because he had a crap dad, Lionel Luthor, who was played by Johnny Glover. His father was just like he was a douche. He was just very mean. He technically neglected Lex Luthor. All he gave him was just like money and, gave him the best education money can buy, gave half of his company. You know what I mean? Like typical Donald Trump rich people stuff. The thing is, well, you kind of see that Lex always had this hatred for his father or always wanted to get his father's love and all that. And Lionel Luthor, he kind of starts off as a villain, but in time he becomes more and more like a confused character. Like he's trying to do good, but everything that he's planning for, everything that he's trying to do for like Clark and his family and even Lex, it's just not going well. So you see the downfall of a villain. He tries to be a good guy. But yeah, Lex Luthor in that show is my favorite Lex Luthor ever. And Michael Rosenbaum, from what I've seen, is a very fun guy. He actually starts off as a comedian, not in the show, but in real life, but he hasn't really done much. And for those who do not know, Michael Rosenbaum actually voiced Wally West in The Flash and the animated Justice League show, which I will get to in a little bit. But yeah, Michael Rosenbaum's just a really cool guy. The show actually had Christopher Reeve on for a couple of episodes. Yeah, and if you ever see the show, you will see Christopher Reeve in a wheelchair. That's not a character thing. And I'll explain to that why in a little bit going forward into the episode, because it's all going to be about Superman. I never thought that I would be doing a Superman episode early on in my podcast or pretty much ever. Never thought. But Smallville, you got to watch it. Again, Tom Welling. It's weird because it's not really a Superman show. It's a Clark Kent show, but they have a lot of Superman villains like Brainiac and Doomsday and Zod. This show also introduced the first live-action Green Arrow before Arrow came out, and it's not the same actor. It's a different variation of the Green Arrow, who is played by Justin Hartley. In the show, he is played by Justin Hartley, who now most of y'all know comes out in This Is Us. I don't know the character that he plays, but he was a pretty good Green Arrow. And also Lois Lane. I will tell you something about Lois Lane in this show. We don't get into the 4th season, which I'm on right now. But how they introduce each other is, I'm not going to go into details of the plot, but Clark landed in a cornfield and Lois Lane crashes her car. And when she sees Clark like in a circle, like in a fetal position, he's naked and he just gets up and Lois is like, just look at his face, Lois. Just look at his face. And I'm like, wow, way to introduce the soon-to-be lovebirds of the show. Because early on in the show, it was about another girl named Lana Lang. No relation. It's a different character. And why it's a different character is because in the 50s, when the comic book writers were thinking, we need to make a prequel comic book series before Clark Kent ever became Superman. Now, since they've established that he met Lois Lane when he started working at the Daily Planet, the writers decided to give him a love interest when he was in high school, so that's where Lana Lang came in. And Annette O'Toole, who played Clark's mother in the show, played Lana Lang in the Christopher Reeve movies, which I'll get into later on. And, the show's good. Alison Mack, what can I say? I already said it. But, it just brings me back to nostalgia. Like, the first time I ever saw the show was back in 2016. It was already, 6 years since the show ended. So the perks of me binge watching show that it ended is that you don't have to wait months for the next season. Now you could just pop in the newer season either right after watching the last episode of the previous season or, you could just watch it now. You don't have to wait months. It just gets my attention. But man, Smallville is such an amazing show. And if you haven't seen it, see it. And if you're one of those people that's, I don't like things that involve with codes and sex trafficking and all that. I understand that. There are people who don't watch movies or shows because a certain cast member or a certain filmmaker was involved in something illegal. So I understand if you don't want to watch the show because of what Alison Mack did. So I'll understand it, but also try not to hold it too much against the show because of what she did. But again, it's your decision. I respect it. I almost didn't rewatch the show because of that, but I'm not holding the show against that because of her. It's not really her show, even though she's actually almost in every episode. She's been there all 10 seasons, so I just gotta hold that in there. But we have a lot to say about the Man of Steel, the one who's either a bird, a plane. Cheesy? But yeah, let's get to it. I'm gonna take a quick break right now, and yeah, you're in for a wild ride. All right, welcome back to Gilbert. It's all about the media podcast. Like I said, this is an entirely Superman-ish episode. Well, yeah, pretty much. Even though I started talking about Peacemaker when the episode started, but anyway. So obviously, how can I do a Superman episode if I'm not going to be talking about Christopher Reeve? And like I said earlier, if you ever watch Smallville, you will see that Christopher Reeve made a guest appearance and he is in a wheelchair. And it's not a character thing. Even though his character is supposed to be like some type of like someone who's resemble like a Stephen Hawking kind of a person. But that wasn't a character thing. So for those who do not know, in 1995, Christopher Reeve was horseback riding. And I don't know if he fell off or if he got kicked off. But for the sake, let's just go with fell off. When he fell off the horse, he landed on his neck. It paralyzed him from the neck down. And also he had a hard time breathing, so he had to breathe through like a tube in his neck for the rest of his life. And yeah, that's pretty much what happened. He was paralyzed from the neck down. He didn't have any more mobility in him. So for a long time, actually for the rest of his life, he was wheelchair bound. He couldn't move, he couldn't write, he couldn't do all the things he did, but it didn't stop him. It didn't stop him. For the remainder of his life, he created a foundation called the Christopher Reeve and Paralysis Foundation. It's still active. Yeah, I looked it up. It's research to help people who have low mobility, either paralysis, probably something that prevents them from having any form of mobility in them, to help people, research, have their ability to walk or to move. And even though like his legs weren't working again, or I'm assuming most of his body was actually able to work, like some of his hand, like some of his fingers were still able to work. I think one of his hands was able to move around, but like his arms, I think his legs were still, he couldn't move them around. But he did have some help. He had like some rehab coaches help him with some of his movements. Like he did actually do a swimming exercise to like help with most of his movement. So yeah, even though like his arms and his legs weren't really working, the coaches were able to help him move him. Even though, yeah, they didn't get a chance to work all the way through, he at least got some movement. But yeah, despite playing, a Superman, he became a real Superman in real life. So I expect that, tragically he died in 2004. But the fact that people are still going to be talking about Christopher Reeve for a long time, that's pretty cool. And, I've seen the Christopher Reeve movies. I've only seen, I think, the first two of them. I did not see Superman 3 that had Richard Pryor. I definitely did not watch The Quest for Peace because if you've seen The Quest for Peace, you know how bad that movie was. The movie was bad. And yeah, I haven't seen it, but just from people telling me what the plot is, I'm like, what? That was a movie? What was Richard Donner thinking? Richard Donner was the director of those movies. But as I look back at it, it's not as action as we get a lot of Superman now. That's because, it was late 70s. It was the late 70s. I guess they didn't do a lot of action, I guess because kids were watching, so they didn't want to do too much violence, even though, yeah, it's Superman. But, I forgot what I was going to say. Oh, yeah. But it didn't just have Christopher Reeve, but Smallville also had, I'm going back to Smallville. It actually had a lot of other, I'm surprised that I forgot a lot of this stuff earlier. But Smallville had also Margot Kidder, who played Lois Lane, who tragically died not too long ago. They also had Dean Cain, who played Superman in the Lois and Clark series back in the 90s, as well as Terry Thatcher, though she was in an archive footage. And Supergirl, the new Supergirl, or the recent Supergirl show has done that. And I might talk about that, not in this episode, but a later episode, because they do the same thing as Smallville does. The only person they never really brought was Gene Hackman, and I guess they had their reasons for it. But Gene Hackman's Lex Luthor, if I was to think of a comic book counterpart of Lex Luthor when first introduced, it would be Gene Hackman. And as I said, yeah, Michael Rosenbaum is my favorite Lex Luthor. But Gene Hackman actually brought, the child, what the kids see of a Lex Luthor, that's what Gene Hackman was. And it's weird because, like, if you've ever seen The French Connection, I think that's what it's called, A Conversation, The Unforgiven, he's always so serious. So for Gene Hackman to play a character like that, so, like the typical, like, supervillain you would hear in, like, little kids movies, little kids shows, it was for the kids, come on. But they're still classic. Interestingly, I wouldn't say the special effects hold up today, but they were pretty interesting special effects for a film that came out, in the 70s. And obviously, John Williams' score in the Superman series, It's sad where Christopher Reeve's movies left off because Superman 3 and Superman 4 were not well received by critics and audiences. And they weren't filmed properly. That's another thing. They weren't filmed, like, properly. They weren't filmed really good. So for Christopher Reeve's Superman to end like that, especially 10 years before he got into his accident. I wish they would have done Christopher Reeve his justice. But, I mean, what can you do? Hey, he fought for truth, justice, and the American way. Also, it amazes me that Marlon freaking Brando, the Godfather, played Superman's father. And, yeah. But also, like, the suit, I mean, I'm going to be honest, it doesn't hold up to today. I'm being honest here, it doesn't hold up. Even though it's iconic, it doesn't hold up. Just because based on, if you look at the material, and it looked like it would be super old. But I'm pretty sure somewhere down the line, they, like in some museum, they might have one of Superman's suits, or Christopher Reeve's suits, whatever you would say. There isn't much to say because I didn't see all the movies, because I don't want to see the third and the fourth one. The first and the second one are always good. And I almost forgot about this. Zod, Terrence Stamp's General Zod was, man, if you ever see real evil Kryptonians, it's Terrence Stamp's Zod. And here's also the interesting thing. Terrence Stamp voiced Jor-El in Smallville. Yeah, I'm going to go back to Smallville, and I'm pretty sure I'm gonna keep going back to Smallville. Yeah, just because I'm binge watching it. Terrence Stamp voices Jor-El in the show, and obviously Jor-El is Superman's birth father from Krypton. But yeah, that's Christopher Reeve Superman for you. I wish I have a lot to say, but again, if I have seen all the movies, I would have. But, it's just like, do I have the willpower to watch Superman 3 and Superman 4? I'm pretty sure some of you guys are going to say no, because those movies sucked big time. The first and the second movie, obviously, they're just pure gold, all right? That's classic Superman for you. And I'm actually going to tell you guys something later on, but the Superman before Christopher Reeves is a big mystery. And I'll tell you why. I'm going to take a break right now, and you'll find out soon enough. All right, we are back to Gilbert. It's all about the media podcast. Yeah, like I said, the guy who played Superman before Christopher Reeve is a mystery. And why I say it's a mystery, I'm going to explain. Why else? So, a long time ago, I came across a movie called Hollywoodland. And Hollywoodland is about the death of George Reeves. No relation to Christopher Reeve. But George Reeves was the Superman before Christopher Reeve. And it's not like it's a different movie or anything. So back in the 1950s, there was a Superman show just called Superman. Oh no, it's The Adventures of Superman. I think that's what it was. That's actually where Christopher Reeve got his inspiration to play Superman, because he's never really read the comics. But then again, like, no actor who's played a superhero, has ever read their comics. So it doesn't surprise me. But George Reeves played Superman in the 50s. That was meant for kids, obviously. And, television back then was different, because I believe they would air it at 4 or 5 o'clock, because that's when kids are already out of school and, they're getting ready, because kids don't do their homework. All they just want to do is watch Superman. But the reason why I'm saying George Reeves is such a mystery is because in 1967, I believe, I could be wrong, so let me check this out. 59. Where did I go to 67? Okay. In 1959, on June 16th, 1959, Christopher Reeve was found dead in his home with a bullet wound in his temple, and the police had ruled out a suicide. However, like forensics and CSI or whatever it is, as they investigated, the gun They looked at the physics of where the gun landed, and apparently it didn't land in a spot where it would have landed if he shot himself, if that makes any sense. Like, I guess if he shot himself, it would be like on his right side or his left side. The gun supposedly was further away from that, and it didn't roll around. They didn't think it rolled around. So they believed that somebody shot him and tried to make it look like a suicide. Because from my understanding, Christopher Reeve, this is just a story, and I don't know if it's 100% true, but he did have an affair with a woman who was married to, I think, the president of MGM Studios, which I think was funding the Superman show. I don't know if I accidentally said Christopher Reeve or George Reeves, but you know what I mean. George Reeves was having an affair, and supposedly her husband got mad about it and knows some people in high places, so probably like mafia type stuff. But the death happened, I think, a year or two after the affair was over. But they believe like it was a hit that just made it look like a suicide, and the guys were sloppy at their job. The other story, because there are three theories, whatever you would say. He was having problems with his fiance at the time, George Reeves. And because how people found out about this is because the night he died, he was having a get-together. And some of his friends overheard an argument between George Reeves and his fiance. And supposedly his fiance shot him, but by accident. They believe they must have been fighting over the gun, which accidentally pulled the trigger that shot George Reeves in the temple, whatever you would say it. But she has refused to say anything. The only people that are saying that would be his friends. And obviously, I mean, this was back in the 50s, you know? Misogyny was pretty big, as it's big right now, but a lot bigger. But the police had put that as an investigation. But she's never revealed the full truth. And we may never understand it or ever know what really happened that day. But also, if you're wondering, he didn't die while making Superman because the show got canceled, I think, after 2 or 3 seasons. So the show came out, I believe, in 1954. It ended in either 56 or 57. And then 2 years later, he was shot dead. Kind of a bad way to put it together, but I mean, it is what it is. And if you're a fan of old movies like I am, he actually he had a small role in From Here to Eternity, which had Frank Sinatra. So, yeah, I recommend watching From Here to Eternity. Yeah, if you want to know details, I guess watch the Hollywoodland. It's not really a full story because there's a second story, and it's about a make-believe cop just trying to understand it. And if you've ever seen pictures on social media where it's Ben Affleck wearing a Superman shirt or costume, that's where it's coming from. Because Ben Affleck played George Reeves. He played George Reeves. And Diane Lane, who played Superman's mom in the recent Henry Cavill film. No, because there's only one. But yeah, she plays the woman that George Reeves was having an affair with. Yeah, Bob Hoskins was playing the guy, Eddie Maddox. That's who it was. Let's get into Eddie. Let's get to it. All right. Yeah, he was a film studio executive and producer of MGM. So yeah, I was right. And supposedly he knows friends in high places. That's how I've learned about it. I didn't know there was I knew there was a Superman before Christopher Reeves, or a couple actually, but I just never knew the full story. And the story of George Reeves is interesting. I mean, it's bad, but it's interesting. You know, because the other reason most people don't want to believe it's a suicide is because supposedly he was going to leave his fiancée for Paris the next day. The next day he was supposed to fly out. So again, we may not fully know the full story, or the story at all. We may not know the story at all, but yeah, it's tragic. It's tragic. It's tragic that it happened. I would say it's better than getting, paralyzed from falling off a horse. It's a bad joke, but still. Yeah, I got a lot more to talk about, and we'll be back. All right, we are back to Gilbert. It's all about the media podcast. So if anyone is like me, you'll probably have grown up with not either the George Reeves, George Reeves, but you didn't grow up with the George Reeves, and you probably didn't grow up with the Christopher Reeves movies either. You didn't grow up with Christopher Reeves or George Reeves, and obviously you didn't grow up with the Smallville. Well, some of us have, but I didn't. Obviously, we didn't grow up with Henry Cavill's nor Dean Kane's. I've never seen any of the ones with Dean Kane. But some of us actually grew up with the animated show, the Superman animated series, and as well as the Justice League animated series. I did not know this, but they're actually voiced by two different people. I thought they were voiced by the same person. So you will get a little bit of a difference in the voice if you rewatch both Superman animated series as well as the Justice League animated series. So Tim Daly was actually the voice of Superman in Superman the animated series. But he decided after the show was canceled, because the show was actually canceled, it wasn't as big as Batman the animated series was, which I will cover in a future episode, because by the time this episode airs, the Batman will be already out. So obviously I'm going to talk about that. But Tim Daly left the project after the show was canceled because it didn't have a broader audience, because Batman's cooler. I'm just kidding. No, seriously, Batman's cooler. But when Warner Bros. Decided to do Justice League the animated series, Tim Daly did not show up for the project. So they went with George Newbern. That's Newbern. George Newbern. He was the new voice of Superman for Justice League the animated series. And he stayed as the voice of Superman for a lot of other stuff like future animated DC movies as well as some of the video games. However, George Daly did come back as Superman for some animated movies as well as video games. So just like Kevin Conroy, who voiced Batman, they did that. Those two who voiced Superman did it as well. They did both TV, movies, and video games. Again, they're not as successful as Kevin Conroy's, Batman. So I'm going to start off with Tim Daly first. First, let's see. Yeah, James Timothy Daly, voice of Superman in the Superman the Animated Series. I gotta see. Here it is. So Superman Brainiac Attacks was when he came back. Superman Batman Public Enemies. That's actually a really good animated movie. I've seen it once, but it was really good. It's basically like Superman Batman Public Enemies is basically about people have brainwashed like everyone's heroes, all the heroes and all that. So all the heroes are brainwashed and Superman and Batman are now being hunted and are seen as like the bad guys. Superman Batman Apocalypse, I've only seen that. I haven't seen that one. But it is about when Darkseid is first introduced in a movie, DC animated movie. And then Justice League Doom, which is about... So Justice League Doom, I saw that one. And so if you know Batman, which I will talk about this. So I'll probably talk about Justice League Doom again when I talk about Batman. If you know Batman, you know that he doesn't take chances in case some of the heroes go rogue. So he knows their weaknesses. So somebody went into Batman's arsenal and put it on all the heroes. So he has an arsenal that he has just in case heroes go rogue. So he has a kryptonite bullet for Superman, obviously. He has a bomb that you can put on the Flash, and if the Flash ever slows down, the bomb will explode. You have something that can cause Martian Manhunter to get caught on fire. Yeah, so Batman came prepared, and I'm not going to defend him right now, but yeah, if that doesn't sound interesting, you got to check it out. Again, Kevin Conroy still Batman. George Newbern, again, like I said, voiced Justice League. He voiced Superman in the animated series. Actually, him and Tim are actually really good friends, so that's nice. They actually did a virtual con together. So it was a panel of both of them. So, it didn't look interesting because it's virtual, so yeah, here it is. So he did Superman Attacks. No, not Superman Attacks. Superman Brainiac Attacks. I have not seen that one. Oh, he did Superman and the Batman. That was interesting. Superman Shazam, The Return of Black Adam. That was actually a really good movie. Superman vs. the Elite. I have not seen that one. The Injustice series. I've only played Injustice once. The first Injustice. I haven't played the other ones. I wish I did. But, yeah. And there were a bunch of others too. I'm actually looking them up too. And Justin Hartley, who I said played Green Arrow in Smallville, had also voiced Superman in the Superman... No, not Superman. He voiced Superman in the Injustice animated movies, which it was either George or Tim, but hey, it is what it is, so. But yeah, those two were really my childhood because I guess, I don't know if anyone's ever remembered Boomerang. I don't even know if it's around anymore, but that's how I think it was Boomerang where I watched like some of the Superman the animated series as well as Justice League, but I saw Justice League, not the movie, but obviously the show. I saw the Justice League when it first came out on Cartoon Network. That was when, Cartoon Network was good. It was good. I don't like what Cartoon Network has been going through since 2007. I don't like the road they've taken. But that was my childhood. Same thing with Kevin Conroy as Batman. That was my childhood. And yeah, I will talk about Kevin Conroy in a future episode. But right now, this is all about Superman, the first hero. But yeah, I got a lot more talks about Superman. Not too much, but yeah, we'll be back. All right, welcome back to Gilbert. It's all about the media podcast. I am still on the Superman rant, though I wouldn't call it a rant. But yeah, so obviously, right now we have one actor that's playing Superman. That is Tyler Hoechlin. He is currently playing Superman in a show on the CW called Superman and Lois. It's about Superman now being a parent of two boys, him and Lois. Of course, Lois knows his secret identity. Yeah, it's only in 2 seasons so far, but because it's supposedly a spinoff of Supergirl, which I might get to in a future episode. I don't 100% know if I will, but because he first appeared on Supergirl, obviously as Clark Kent Superman, and yeah, it's really much a lot of drama, but and there's only 2 seasons so far, but he is currently right now the only actor right now that's playing a live action Superman. But obviously I'm going to be talking about Henry Cavill. Henry Cavill's Superman, he does have the face, you know what I mean? He has the face to be Superman. He has the physique to be Superman, But when it comes to the movies he's done, that's another thing. So obviously the movies like Man of Steel and Batman vs. Superman and the theatrical Justice League in 2017, obviously those movies did not go as planned or as well as Zack Snyder had helped to do. But you gotta understand, it wasn't really Zack Snyder's direction. It was really Warner Brothers now wanting to do a cinematic universe, as Marvel has been doing, because this came out a year after the Avengers. Man of Steel came out a year after the Avengers, and it's funny because Batman vs. Superman was supposed to come out in 2014. It was supposed to come out that year, but it just kept getting pushed back because of reshoots and studio interference. That's what brought the DC movies downhill was because of Warner Brothers. And because of that, Henry Cavill may never get his second movie. And I've been wanting that for a long time. And there were ideas of the second movie too. There wasn't really a script. There was an idea. And there were multiple ideas. And one of them was going to have Brainiac as the villain. The other idea was going to introduce Kara Zor-El, who is Supergirl, which now she will appear in the Flash movie. And then the other idea was supposed to introduce Martian Manhunter before we got him in the Zack Snyder's Justice League last year. So there was all these ideas, but it just never came together, or it just never really happened because of the movies. And, Henry Cavill has been open to coming back, but at this time he's actually pushing 40. But he still looks good. But also Amy Adams is, despite looking good for her age, she's also pushing 50. Though I'm pretty sure at this point, age is nothing but a number, which people should have been thinking about earlier in life, but it is what it is. But I do want to see Henry Cavill get his next movie, and supposedly this upcoming Flash movie is going to erase all that. So there won't be a Batfleck, which also I will get into in another episode. So there won't be a Batfleck, there won't be Henry Cavill, supposedly. But then Ezra Miller said that's all a lie. Who knows? I hope it's not, because it was just all for nothing. And that's because, Warner Brothers was like, we're not going to do this anymore. So they decided to cancel other projects. So Warner Brothers was better off. I think DC should just only worry about making what they want, rather than just having to worry about a cinematic universe or having a lot of films, tying together. But Henry Cavill, man, it's just sad, And he's actually I like him as Superman. His Clark Kent, on the other hand, because here's the thing. This is another thing about Christopher Reeves. I think he's the only actor that's able to put the best of both worlds at his time. And you'll understand what I mean. At his time, there wasn't a lot of violence in the comics as well as the animated shows back then. So there's another thing about Christopher Reeve was he was able to play the bumbling Clark Kent, the secret identity, and then to play like the tough Superman, who he really is. So that's kind of like where I get into Christopher Reeve's Superman. Henry Cavill's Superman, and I've also been noticing this in others. They really haven't been like putting the best of both worlds, because so far he's only good as Superman or Kal-El, which is his secret identity, or his real name, his real Kryptonian name. He's only good at those two. His Clark Kent needs some work. You know what I mean? And Tom Welling's was only, good as a younger Clark Kent. There was no secret identity. So, but you eventually do see the best of both worlds happen as the series progresses to its last season. Because what would you expect about a prequel show about Superman? But if they ever do decide to redo Superman, which is going to happen, especially I think they're going to do a Black Superman, they have to do the best of both worlds. They have to have someone be like the bumbling Clark Kent and, the manly Superman, Because Brandon Routh, though I think he was very cool as Superman, he tried too much to be like Christopher Reeve, and it took me a while to think, why did people hate Superman Returns? I didn't understand the full hate until I did some research and, I started like rewatching the film. I understand it now. Bryan Singer was so busy on making this film close to the original. Like he wanted, because this is supposed to be a direct sequel to the second movie. So I understand it, but he worked so much on like this movie trying to fit into the Christopher Reeve film, as well as Brandon Routh trying to like give us Christopher Reeve, that they forget how to be original themselves. So I get you're trying to tie in, but also you have to be original while doing it. So, especially since, Superman Returns came out in 2006. So audience-wise, it wouldn't work. You know what I mean? Like if you're a fan of the original Superman films and then you see Superman Returns, it just doesn't fit well, because we were no longer in 1976 or 78 where violence was censored. We were living in 2006 where now you can see people get their heads blown off or like their guts cut. Well, even though that didn't happen in the movie, but you can step up the violence. There wasn't a lot of action and the story got very complicated, especially with Clark Jr. Yeah, Clark Jr. His name was Jason in the film. I think it was Jason. Yeah. Brandon Routh did get his redemption back in the Crisis on Infinite Earth miniseries on the CW, where he came back as his Superman. This time it was Superman Kingdom Come. If you don't know what that is, it's basically like now he's older and he's lost everything, but he's still trying to shine the light onto the darkness. That's what it is. If you ever see the Superman Kingdom Come picture, it's no longer like a bright, shiny S. It's a S with a black background, representing the light in the darkness, or coming out of the darkness. But yeah, Brandon Routh was, I wouldn't say he was bad, he just wasn't given a chance. Same thing with Henry Cavill, and he's no longer getting his chance. I'm scared that the next Superman, assumingly, it was supposed to be a Michael B. Jordan, but I guess they abandoned that project. If they are going to the Black Superman route, please do not let this be a one and done. Give him a more chance. As well as also give us, let this actor still give us Clark Kent and Superman, a bumbling, like, that's funny. Could you just imagine like an Urkel type figure and then turning into a, like a big macho Superman? That would be a funny thing to look at. If it sounds racist, I am so sorry. But so far, Tyler Hoechlin's been doing good. But again, I don't think he's going to get his chance in the future, because right now the CW might be losing its rights from Warner Brothers. I believe that's what's going on. Basically, it might no longer be a channel anymore. So all the shows that are on the CW are probably all going to have to be canceled instantly. That's what really I'm afraid of. And I do like, it's interesting to see what Tyler is doing with both Clark and Superman. Now you're seeing the two worlds handling on being a dad, as well as, him having to balance dad life and hero life. And his kids do know that he's Superman. His sons are both named after both of his dads, Jonathan and then Jordan, Jor-El. And let's talk about the dad, by the way. Oh man, it sucks to be Jonathan Kent. I'm sorry. It's like Uncle Ben in the Spider-Man movies. He dies. He gets killed. Same thing with Jonathan Kent. He either has a heart attack or in the Henry Cavill, he gets sucked in a tornado. Like, spoiler alert, in Smallville, in the 5th season, Jonathan Kent has a heart attack and dies. And the Superman and Lois literally like the introduction. Hey, this is me from Krypton. This is my dad. Oh yeah, now he has a heart attack and dies. Now I'm like, can you do the Aunt May thing they did in, what they did in Spider-Man? Like, now, can we have Martha die? Does that sound too harsh for me to say? Maybe. But who knows? Maybe Henry will get his chance. Maybe it will happen. I hope it happens. But yeah, I'm going to take one last break and we'll end it from there. All right, welcome back to Gilbert. It's all about the media podcast. We are closing it off today. Our Superman episode. I will say, though, that this one and the future Batman episode that I will do, probably after this one, will be the easiest superhero ones. Just because, on a standpoint, there's been a lot of movies and a lot of actors that ever play them. That's kind of why it's been easier. But, speaking of chances, Nicolas Cage got his chance. If anyone doesn't know, Nicolas Cage was supposed to play Superman in a movie back in the 90s, I believe. And they already had a photo shoot ready. There's literally photos of him wearing the Superman suit, but it never happened. Fast forward to 2018, now he's the voice of Superman in the Teen Titans Go. Now it just boggles my mind. Nicolas Cage played Superman, even though it's not live action. But he got his chance, so I don't want that to be Henry Cavill's chance. It's interesting because there's a documentary about the making of pretty much all the DC heroes, because when I got my Smallville packet, that's where I've been watching it. I have a DVD collection of Smallville. There is a documentary about, the making of DC Comics, and, man, they were going overboard on what to do with Superman, because the idea was first a guy who came from space to protect all humanity, So they're just writing a lot of things. Some of the Superman powers I don't think should be around. What is it? Cool breath or whatever? Super breath? I don't know. Is that really necessary? I guess. I don't know. X-ray vision, I'll let that slide. Heat vision, I'll take it. Actually, in Smallville, like I said, there's going to be a lot of talk of Smallville in this episode. His heat vision was more like heat waves. They're not like red lines as we usually see in other media. But heat vision, I'll accept. Strength and speed and flying, obviously, you need those to be a superhero. And from what I've learned is, and I don't know if it was true or not at the time, but if you've ever seen the movie Glass, the main girl says that the original Superman didn't fly. I did not believe that until I looked it up and then rewatched the documentary. He did not fly. The flight came to the next edition, or not the next, but a couple of editions after. It was mainly more of speed and strength. So, because in the beginning, it was only about strength or speed, and all the powers didn't. Okay, I guess what I'm saying is that the first Superman comic didn't have him with all his powers. The powers started progressing as the stories kept going on. So that's pretty much what Smallville did. And I guess I would say that. Spoiler alert, final episode, that's when he flew. The whole time, never knew how to fly. But he floated, which is kind of a thing. Yeah, it was mainly just strength and speed. And then more and more started happening. But I felt as they were writing, I know the writers were dude, we're giving him too much powers. He needs to have a weakness. What do we give him? Then out of nowhere, green rocks. Let's give him some green rocks to figure out the kryptonite. But in the show, they called it meteor rocks because they didn't know what it was at the time. So, and it's funny because it's the show actually showed us really how kryptonite came to Earth. So when Krypton blew up, I'm pretty sure this happened in the comics too, but when Krypton blew up, fragments of Krypton, which obviously was the kryptonite, landed onto Earth. So obviously there's the green kryptonite, which weakens him, but then there's the red kryptonite, which turns him into the biggest a-hole you could ever think of. The show introduced a black kryptonite, basically meaning you could split up a Kryptonian in two or remove one Kryptonian side from their human side. That doesn't come in handy until Supergirl. Gold kryptonite, which supposedly removes his powers permanently. Then there's blue kryptonite, which just makes him powerless, makes him human. But apparently, back then, that wasn't the case. Apparently, red kryptonite was supposed to make him weak. But I guess when the animated show back in the 60s happened, I think green just felt more appealing with like the visuals. So that's why they changed it to green kryptonite. I'm still thinking why did they thought of rocks, but I guess because, he's too powerful and all that. So, and then later on, they're like, now let's have aliens come down. That way it's a fair match. It's a fair match. But this is a character I know that's going to keep getting repeated. I would want to do a Superman prequel, but to Henry Cavill's Superman, because I feel like the character needs to be planned out more. I think that's where the downfall of Zack Snyder's Man of Steel. It wasn't planned out that much. It was just more like he's someone who just discovered that he's an alien, and then now he's a superhero. I don't know. I do like Man of Steel. I have it on DVD, but there are some villains they haven't yet touched, like Toyman. Toyman is a terrorist who uses toys as weapons. That could be good. Believe it or not, that could be good on a Christopher Reeve, but the DC Extended Universe, I don't think they're calling that anymore, but they could have used that one as like an earlier Superman. Yeah, that's my problem with some superhero movies, is that when it's like their first movie, when it's somebody who's getting used to their powers, they automatically give them the all-powerful villain. That's not really what they should do. Like, start off with a small villain, an entertaining villain, but, a small entertaining villain that will help a hero progress when he automatically has to fight a very, powerful being, But if we're going to talk about what I want to do with Superman, is I actually want to make a movie about Christopher Reeve and his struggle with paralysis. It might sound boring, but if you get the details right and you write it as entertaining and as interesting as possible, it would be a good movie. I would actually release it early in the years just because something like that would be like a whole bait Oscar thing that people would go for. I mean, that's kind of like why I love the Jackie Robinson movie. It was released earlier in the year and avoided Oscar season. Oscar season is like fall to January. That's Oscar season. So that would be a plan. And like I said, ever want to understand what the Christopher Reeve wanted, go check out And Paralysis Foundation. Who knows what can happen? Who knows what can they do? Superman hasn't really been my favorite superhero, to be honest with you. But the topic and talking about it and seeing it is entertaining, And here's the thing. Superman has always been seen as like a Christ-like figure. A guy with godlike powers, comes to save humanity. No matter if someone is evil or someone has bad intentions or someone's good, he's there. I mean, if you've seen Superman Returns, when he falls back on the earth, he shows this a resemblance of Christ on the cross. That's always been the case with the movies, even the Christopher Reeve movies. But, he's always been seen as this Christ-like figure. And my friend and I, when we first saw Man of Steel, we talked about the struggle of God. And that, if you remember, Superman killed Zod in Man of Steel and he didn't want to. So we resembled that as God having to sacrifice, his one and only son to save the world. And I never thought I'd get biblical early on in here, but I guess that's all I got. Even if you're not a big fan of Superman, you gotta check out the Christopher Reeve movies and at least check out Smallville. Come on, man. And like I said earlier, if you don't want to watch anything or someone like a cast or a crew was involved in sex trafficking and all that, I'll understand that. But try not to also hold the show against that because it's not really their show. But again, I'll understand if you don't. But that's my show. Thank you guys so much for listening, and I'll be back with the next episode.